Hello everybody, today I'm doing Lightroom stuff. I've done this before on my Instagram, but it's private, so you haven't seen it before, so here we go. I'm going to show you how I make HDR photos in Lightroom. The photo's already up, so I'll pop it up right here. But basically, it starts out with these three different exposures. So we got a really bright one, a really dark one, and a medium one. So basically, there's different ways you could do this. You could adjust the exposure yourself, or my drone has an HDR mode, so it'll take the three bracketed shots. Bracketing is when you take a really bright photo, really dark photo, and a middle photo. Basically just copying different exposures, and then in editing you'll merge them together. So there's an HDR mode on DJI drones, and that's what I used here. So you see all the different brightnesses and exposures. So let's get into it. So what I'm going to do is select this photo. It's already selected. Then I'm going to hold shift and hit the last photo, and then you're going to right click or two finger click if you're on a Mac, and you're going to hit photo merge HDR, and then it's going to do its little loading bar, and there we go. So you could do different levels of deghosting, basically trying to get rid of like pieces of the photos that are different, but these photos are all pretty similar. The waves didn't really change. I'm just gonna set it to low, and then you're gonna hit merge. And then you'll have another loading bar up in the top left, and done. So here's the next, here's the HDR photo, and it combines all three of them. So normally what I do after this is I'll just label all of these yellow, so I know that I'm not using them. And then here's the HDR photo. So now I just go about my normal editing, and I start with chromatic aberrations and profile corrections. Lightroom doesn't have the DJI Mavic Air for some reason, so I always just change it to the Mavic Pro, and does a pretty good job. Next I mess with my exposure a little bit, and I bring down my highlights most of the time because I want to try and get back some of those details. Then my shadows, I'm going to bring those down because the photo's kind of hazy. Might bring up some whites so there's a little bit of contrast in the highlights, and I'll drop my blacks too. And then with drone photos, I find they're not the sharpest thing in the world. They're basically cell phone cameras. I have a Mavic Air, so it's not like the sharpest thing in the world, so I like to add texture and clarity just so it looks a little sharper and more detailed. I don't go overboard on vibrance and saturation at the start, mostly because when I get to the HSL settings, I'll adjust all my saturation for each individual color, and that's usually where most of it comes from. So next we got the S curve, well, not the S curve, the tone curve, but I normally edit in S curve just because it adds some nice contrast. So Lightroom's latest update actually added this. So it already had the red, green, and blue tone curves, but now it has a gradient overlay in the background, so you could kind of see what you're doing. Now is the fun part: hue, saturation, and luminance. I hope that wasn't too loud. So yeah, this is probably my favorite part of Lightroom because you get to adjust each color individually, and it's pretty fun because if you look at this mountain right here, I can make it a little bit more yellowy or a little more red. I think I'm gonna hint towards red a little bit, and do the same thing here. So next is split toning. So split toning, basically it's gonna add whatever color you choose. It's like the hue of your choice, let's say that. It's like a buffet. So you're gonna add the hue of your choice to your highlights and your shadows. And then in the middle there's this little balance one. So let's just go really over dramatic with it. We got red and green, Christmas time. And then your balance is going to change the amount of each color going there. So if you want your highlights hue to be more prevalent, you take it to the right. You want your shadows to be more prevalent, you take it to the left. But we're not doing that because that looks kind of crazy. So what I'm gonna do is maybe go green on the highlights, or kind of teal, and then in the shadows I might go orangey. So I like to bring up my saturation a lot so I could really see what color I have selected. Then I could really tell what's going on and fix it the way I like it, like that. Post crop vignette, it'll add that either dark rim or light rim around your photo, but I'm going to show you a different way to do that. So here's a fun part. Your calibration tab, it kind of adjusts all the colors. So it's pulling your reds. When you're messing with the red tab, it's pulling everything a little bit. So it's almost like your HSL tab, except it's affecting all the colors as if it's a hue adjustment in Photoshop, and you're just using the master adjustment and pulling it over. So I try to go pretty light with these ones, and you don't really have to use them if you don't want to, but I like to use them and see if I could pull out any more colors that I wouldn't have gotten when I mess with my HSL. So next is the vignette. So if you do Shift M, you're gonna get your little radial mask, and you could drag it out to be whatever size you want. I think about here is good. And you're gonna wanna undo the tick box to invert the mask, and then you'll see the outside gets affected more than the middle. So this is a different way to add a vignette to your photo, because you could darken the edges, but you have more control over where it goes and how dark it is. You could even, if you really wanted to, change the color of the outside. Another thing that just got added in Lightroom's newest update, both for Lightroom Classic and Lightroom CC, is you could change the hue of that selected area, which is pretty cool because you used to not be able to do that in Lightroom. You could go here and like change color, but it would just add a tint. It wouldn't actually affect the color itself. So now you have more of a Photoshop kind of setting going on. I want your eye to be focused on the center of the photo, so just hit M, you get your graduated filter, and this is like a gradient basically. So if I decided to make it orange, you could see that the more you drag it out, the more gradual it will fade through. So this line is basically gonna be your strongest portion where everything's affected, and after that it fades out slowly. I'm going to take down the exposure here and drag this down and make the roll off a little less obvious. Basically, if I delete it and then put it back, it's making the bottom of the photo darker, so it's kind of like the background's dark. So like if you were there, this doesn't make a ton of sense, it's just kind of how I think of it, but the behind you would be darker, so you're looking in on the bright area of the photo, and it kind of centers you in on the focus point more. And do the same thing for the clouds at the top of the photo. And then finally, I think these mountains, I like them a lot, and I need them to be a little bit more saturated. So I'm just gonna go over here and hit saturation a little. So here's our before and our after. And yeah, I think that is a finished photo. So that's how you make a HDR photo in Adobe Lightroom. And yeah, if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. You could do this on your phone too. I don't think you could photo merge HDR in your phone, but in the mobile app you could do basically everything here with the free version. And if you have the trial, you could use the mask, the radial filter, and the graduated filter. But besides that, if you want to see anything else, drop it in the comments below, any questions also. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this little Lightroom tutorial photo breakdown, and I'll see you guys in the next one.